tell my cancer story. And while it was true, I'm a caregiver and I was never diagnosed with cancer, caregivers get brought into a cancer journey as well. So today I'm going to talk not about my brother's cancer journey, but about mine. Those hidden fears and those secrets, the things that we don't dare say. We don't ever tell our loved one because the attention should be on our loved one who is fighting the disease, and we don't want anyone to worry about us. So a little background, I am the youngest of 3 children and the only girl, thank you. My oldest brother, though, he died when he was a baby. And my parents are excellent parents. So even though my brother Michael died before we were born, my parents gave us a relationship with him. We knew him. They would tell us stories about him, and I don't, even today, have any problem saying I have 2 older brothers. But the biggest lesson my parents taught us is that your friends are going to come and go, but you will always have each other. They would tell Jeff, you are always going to have your sister. And they would tell me, you will always have your brother. And that stuck. Now, don't get me wrong. We fought, and we fought all the time. Even as adults, we fought all the time. But nobody protected me more, and vice versa. So it was a bit of a shock when Jeff got diagnosed with cancer. He was 30 and I was 28, and he was diagnosed with inoperable stage 4 colorectal cancer that had metastasized to both lobes of his liver. And the doctor told us there was no hope and no cure. And it's one of those moments where I remember exactly where I was when the doctor was in the room, and I was standing up against the hospital wall, and I felt my knees just kind of give out, and I just slowly sank to the floor. And I sat there on a hospital floor, which I don't recommend ever doing, and looking up at my brother and thinking, oh God, I'm not always going to have my brother. And as the doctor's saying that you have 1.5 to 2.5 years to live, and there was no hope and no cure, I literally felt that the hospital floor could just swallow me up alive. When we got home that night, we Googled colon cancer, just hoping that there was something that the doctor didn't tell us. And I gotta say, Google disappointed us. There was no hope on Google either. The next morning, Jeff had his first colonoscopy. And the doctor said, I'm not talking to everybody. I will give the results to one person. And again, it was one of those moments that I'm never, ever going to forget, because I sat there in this terrible hospital waiting room. And my mom opened up the door and she looked at me and said, you're getting a colonoscopy. And I said, I know, Mama. And then she closed the door and she said, this is my fault. I did this to him. Well, it turns out that doctor literally told her, well, you certainly did a number on him. This is genetic. He got this from you. So my mom called his employer to tell them that my brother was sick in the hospital and wouldn't be into work. And they said, we're so sorry. He's in our prayers. God bless. A few days later, Jeff got released from the hospital, and there was a note from his employer that said that his job status had been changed from a full-time employment to on-call. So that means that he just lost his health insurance. I moved back home to help financially, but it didn't really help. Jeff had to go on Cobra, which is so expensive. And that compounded with his car insurance, his car payment, his cell phone payment, and all the other odds and end bills, they really added up. So having those financial worries compounded with the health worries just made everything feel 10 times worse. But we never talked about it with each other. It was just some kind of unspoken stressor, and it took its toll. Chemo began the very next week, and we were lucky. Jeff got put on a clinical trial that was actually held at our neighborhood oncology office. Sounds kind of weird to say. And my mom was at work and she was talking to somebody and she said, you know what, call the American Cancer Society. They've got a toll-free number, 24 hours a day. They can answer your questions. And my mom went, oh, okay, yeah, right. 24 hours, sure. But we didn't want to have the conversation when Jeff was alive. Like, we wanted to be able to just openly talk with somebody. So we waited till he was asleep in his room, and we called 800-227-2345, and we pressed 1 because someone we knew had been diagnosed with cancer. And a real person talked on the phone to us and cried on the phone to us for hours, answering every question we never wanted to ask about colon cancer. In this clinical trial, it gave Jeff sensitivity to temperatures. Too hot, too cold, he was worse than Goldilocks. And so he had trouble eating. And one of my jobs was to try to make food at night. And I would get whatever food he wanted me to get. And I would make whatever dinner, all of his favorite foods we were just making. And he would sit there, and eventually he would kind of push his mostly uneaten plate aside. And he lost 80 pounds within 2 months. And I felt like a failure because I could not get him to eat. Around that time, Jeff got genetic testing done. And again, I didn't think about it at the time because there was just literally too much else to worry about. And we got his test results, and just as Dr. Jerk said, it was genetic. And the video on genetic colon cancer told us that he had the very worst type of genetic colon cancer you could have. So if you're going to do something, I guess, do it right. But now we had to be tested. Now, I'd already had my colonoscopy, and I was already deemed like no polyps. I was okay. We knew I did not have colon cancer at the time. But the genetic testing was like another piece of that pie. But it wasn't something, again, that I really worried about, because it's not like it was a test you could study for. You either had it or you didn't. And that was, tomorrow's worry. I had other worries that were going to happen. But at night, now, I'm not a horror movie person. I don't like them. I don't like being scared. The one horror movie I've ever seen was the Scream movie, and not even all of them, just the first one. And the night I took, the night of the day that I took the genetic test, I had my first nightmare. And the Scream monster was chasing me. And in my nightmares, I was just running all the time, and just so scared all the time. And every night, the Scream monster wouldn't catch me, but he would catch someone I loved, a good friend, a family member, and he would kill them. And I would just keep running and telling people, come on, we gotta go, he's after us, come on, we gotta go. And this happened every night for weeks. I was not sleeping. And then one night, the Scream monster caught me. But instead of killing me, gave me a black card with this purple ribbon on it. And again, didn't even occur to me then, even, that this was about my fear of the genetic testing being done. Well, the next day, my mom called me when I was on my way home from work crying, and she says, honey, you're clear, you don't have it. And Dad and I, we don't have it either. Jeff self-mutated, we're fine, you're clear. And I felt relieved, because I wasn't going to have to go through what my brother was going through. And then I felt guilty, because I was relieved that I wasn't going to go through what my brother was going through, that his reality was never going to be my reality. And I felt guilty for that. Jeff got invited to his first Relay for Life through his oncology office, and I could not go. I had plans that day. But when I got home, he was gushing about how great it was. And he said, Shell, it was the best thing, because guess what? The doctors were wrong. I found out that there's always hope. During Jeff's treatments, I watched a show called The Last Lecture. And it's about a professor who was going through, I believe, pancreatic cancer. And it was considered that he was at the end of treatment and therefore going to pass away. And so he decided his last college lecture would be about what he learned about life and death, because he was going to die. And I need to watch it again, because I don't remember everything he said. I remember his wife. And his wife said, when the interviewer asked her, how are you dealing with your husband's, knowing your husband's going to die? And she said, I would sit there and I would watch him play with our children, and I would think to myself, this might be the last time I ever watch him do this. And then I would have to tell myself that's not helpful. And I found myself doing that, especially that last year, because I knew. See, statistically, people that have been diagnosed with inoperable stage 4 colorectal cancer, they have a 0% chance of living after 5 years. Jeff was given 1.5 to 2.5 years, and we were hitting that 5-year mark. In fact, that last entire summer was the best and worst summer of my life. My boyfriend of 3 years had proposed to me, and I had said yes. And then he asked my brother, who was a friend of his, will you stand up for me in the wedding? And Jeff said yes, and he was so excited. Well, not really thinking about it, I started quickly planning my wedding. And everything was a rush. And our date had been set. It was over a year later, July 13th, 2013, and it was just June. But I had the entire wedding planned and done by the middle of August. And my best friend, who was going to be my matron of honor, said, Shell, what are you doing? Take this time to get what you want. It's okay. Look around. You don't have to get this done now. And I said, Nan, I want my brother to be at my wedding. And he may not. And I want to be able to, if the doctors say it's time, it's done, it's over, to say, okay, let's get married. And I had even talked to our priest and said, is it a problem? Will you marry me if my brother can't get to a church? Will you marry me outside of the church? And he said, Shell, I'll marry you in your brother's hospital room if that's what you really want me to do. And I said, okay, that's our plan then. And my brother found out, and he was furious. He said, the last 5 years of your life have been about me. Your wedding day will not be about me. I will be there at your wedding. I will dance with you at your wedding. I promise. Well, the days went by, and Jeff got worse. And December, we were buying Christmas gifts, and it's the weirdest thing, buying gifts for somebody when you know they're not going to be around to really use them. And we rang in the new year, and then Jeff got hospitalized, and he was in and out of the hospital in January, and the doctors kept telling us, you need to put him on hospice. And my mom said, he's not ready. He doesn't want to die. He's not ready to die. He still wants to fight. And they said, well, there is nothing we can do for him. He needs to go home, and he needs to go home on hospice. And Jeff said no, and my mom said no. So he went home with the intent of going to Boston to visit some fancy surgeon who was resecting liver tumors in a crazy degree. But he wasn't always lucid. And when he wasn't lucid, he would try to pull the tubes. The tubes were bugging him. So when we went to bed that night, we attached a Velcro to the tubes so we could hear when he was trying to pull at the tubes. And then we put a baby monitor by his bed, and my dad and I slept right outside his room. My mom needed her sleep. She was with him every night in the hospital. And then we would hear that rip, and one of us would yell, Velcro! And we would run inside the room, and we would fix the tubes back up, and we would calm him down, get him okay, and then we would go back and try to go to sleep. And this happened all night long. Well, that morning, my brother called the three of us into the room, and he said, I'm dying. And then he looked at me and said, I lied, and I'm so sorry, but I won't be at your wedding. Jeff died January 24th, 2013 at 4:33 a.m. And that summer I got married. And we had a picture of my brother from before he started his treatments, looking healthy, looking how he looked. And we digitally altered it so that the boutonniere he was wearing in that wedding matched the ones in mine. And I had the florist make him a special one that would go over his picture. And he got to stand up there with the other groomsmen. I'm so sorry, you guys, I'm so sorry. For 5 years, I thought I was the only one that had complete meltdowns in private. I called them 30-second meltdowns. I would stop at a red light and I would ugly cry. I don't know what the people in the other cars thought was going on. And then the light would turn green, and it was like I would drive away like nothing happened. But I needed to release all that tension, but it never occurred to me that my parents were doing the exact same thing in different times of their day. I even had certain playlists on my car because there was times I just could not hear a happy song, and I needed a song to fit my mood, because for those 3 minutes I could just feel, and I allowed myself to feel. But the truth is, we should have shared. We should have talked. Because talking to others is how you get help. It's other caregivers saying, call the 800 number. They can get you a cheaper hotel room to stay at. You guys don't have to drive back and forth to San Diego every single day for this other clinical trial. It's other caregivers telling you it's okay to not be okay, because you don't have to be 100% of the time. I talk a lot about how Relay helped Jeff and became a haven for Jeff, but in fact it did that for me too. That 11 years after his death, it still continues to do that, because society has a predetermined time for mourning, right? Don't mourn too long or somebody tells you you need to get over it. You know, when someone first dies, their death is just right in your face at all times. You can't even breathe because it's right there. And then eventually it moves to the side for you, and kind of your grief just like walks beside you for a while. And then eventually you can breathe a little bit and you can live a little bit, and your grief and their death is not constantly on your mind. But it pops out at you when somebody says something, a song or a phrase, or when your child's up on a stage reading a poem, or you're watching your children play baseball or soccer or doing their theater, and your heart is filled with so much pride, but then so much sadness, because you know your brother would have been there, such a proud uncle cheering them on with you, and he's not. And the unfairness of the fact that he's not there beside you, it hits you. But Relay is a place where people don't judge me for that. Relay is a place where I can cry and mourn even 11 years later, and it's okay. Relay is a place where I can look out into a crowd of people and say those 5 years were the worst years of my life, and I would love to have even a single day back, and every single person would completely 100% understand. So this caregiver thanks you. Thank you for being my support system when I didn't even know I needed a support system. And thank you for having my back. And to all those caregivers out there who are still caregiving, I'm going to tell you this: it is okay to not be okay. You do not need to be 100% of the time. And when you're not, I have your back. Thank you.